Like unmarked graves, the portraits from the Holtermann collection have laid dormant in the vaults of the State Library of New South Wales in Sydney for over 7 decades. They now rest in their cryogenic black and white state, seemingly without a past or a future. Their fixed gazes stare back at us as frozen subjects from history. But who were they? By researching each individual, and as more and more details are discovered, they will slowly regain the colour they once had, but more importantly, their personality that has eluded them for over 150 years. Come with us back in time as we attempt to bring these forgotten strangers back to life. The Holtermann collection and the State Library identifies this glass plate negative as A2823103. But by reversing the negative, the American and Australasian Photographic Company identifies it as Mr. Bryant. In a previous episode titled The Sign of Commerce, The Things You See, Chris identified a signwriter by the name of John Bryant and managed to locate quite a few images of him captured in the Holtermann collection. And although this Mr. Bryant is seated, it's still quite evident that he is a much taller and leaner man than the stocky, shorter build of the painter, John Bryant. So who was he? And why? Was he a cut above the rest? To find out, we need to refer back to the Hill End names and occupations records and target the years 1872 to 1873. The resulting search reveals 7 entries relating to the name Bryant. At the bottom of the list appears the painter John Bryant, who was active in Hill End in 1873, but we can be confident is not the Mr. Bryant in the portrait. This then leaves 2 separate men with the name of Bryant in the target years between 1872 to 1873. Appearing above John Bryant on the list is a miner by the name of James Bryant. However, extensive research reveals unplausible connections, leaving the second gentleman identified as George Henry Bryant. This record further elaborates that he occupied a premises on Clark Street and, in addition, as a butcher. Future findings will later confirm that this is the man in the portrait, and now that we have a name, a subtle hint of the colour within begins to surface. Further research reveals he was born George Henry Bryant on the 9th of May 1837 in Sydney to parents John Bryant and Catherine Kitty Stone. John and Catherine were married at Weston, Somerset, England on the 17th of December 1832 before coming to Australia the following year in 1833. Records reveal that George's father John was a tailor. And by 1844, when George was 7 years old, it appears that his father was applying his trade 205 kilometres west of Sydney in the town of Kelso near Bathurst. It was during this time in Kelso that George's mother gave birth to a baby girl named Mary Ann in 1839, a little sister for George. and the following year, Catherine was once again with child. It was another girl, registered as Maria Bryant. But the child's father's name is not listed as John Bryant, but otherwise John Ingersoll. By 1844, George's parents were separated. The story behind Catherine and Mr. Ingersoll leads down a different rabbit hole altogether. So resisting that temptation, we will return all of our attention to George Henry Bryant. George's father remarried a woman by the name of Elizabeth Jeffreys in 1844, and with the discovery of Australia's first payable gold in an area then known as Louisa Creek, the Bryants were on their way 120 kilometres north of Kelso to what would become better known as the town of Hargraves. At an early age, John, rather than following his father as a tailor, otherwise obtains employment as an apprentice butcher, and possibly under the guidance of a local butcher named John Petrie. This photograph, courtesy of Keith Stapley, a descendant of John Bryant, is believed to be the remains of John Petrie's butcher shop in Hargraves. Of course, the speculation of an apprenticeship with John Petrie is just that, a speculation. But it is feasible as one of John's daughters, Mary Ann, who at the time was just 13 years of age, would have been a regular visitor to her father's store. But as time went on, and now 4 years later in 1861, George Henry Bryant married the 17-year-old daughter of a butcher. Her name was Mary Ann Petrie, the boss's daughter.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my greatest privilege to introduce to you Mr. and Mrs. George Henry Bryant.
This photograph, also the courtesy of Keith Stapley, is of the Church of St. Stephen's in Hargraves. And it is where George and Mary were married on the 15th of February 1861. At the time of their marriage, George was 24 years old and Mary was just 17. With the wedding vows consecrated, the seed was planted with what would eventually become a very vigorous Bryant family tree, beginning with the birth of their first child named Albert, the following year in 1862. Record suggests that Albert was born in the district of Mudgee. However, he was more likely to have been born at Hargraves. Between 1864 and 1868, Mary gave birth to a further 3 more children. Firstly, Mary Jane in 1864. Walter George in 1866. And Jessie 2 years later in 1868. And once again, all were likely to have been born at Hargraves. With his growing responsibilities and a new sense of direction in his life, the colour within George Henry Bryant continues to show through. But with the decline of the gold mining industry in Hargraves, and the waning population as a result, George has a decision to make, and with that, another direction to follow. While the gold was disappearing from the hills and creeks of Hargraves, the miners followed those same creeks further south before coming to a secondary source, So, like many others, the Bryants packed their belongings and headed just 37 kilometres south to the rich alluvial goldfield town known as Tambaroora. But before too long, the primary source of the gold was discovered just a little over 7 kilometres, even further to the south, in a place they called the Bald Hills. And while the entire district was still widely referred to as Tambaroora, it also wasn't too long before this area of Tambaroora surpassed the original alluvial settlement. And with the Bald Hills now attracting the bulk of the population, it required its own identity. And so, that identity became known as the town of Hill End. Hill End was once described as having
a mile of shops, 27 hotels, 8,000 residents, and a few effluent problems.
Amongst the mile of shops, George managed to acquire a small parcel of land from a gentleman by the name of George Gardner. In this 1874 map of leaseholders, courtesy of the Hill End and Tambaroora Gathering Group, it shows Gardner's lease situated on the eastern side of what is now known as Byers Avenue and about 50 metres to the north of the Royal Hotel. If you were to take a short stroll down the road from the pub and stop at about this location, you would be standing before a vacant block of land that was once George Henry Bryant's first butcher shop. The shop stood within inches from Abraham Moses, wholesale wine and spirit merchant. And in this section of the panorama taken by Merlin, the Royal Hotel can be seen shortly after its construction. And within this same photograph, Moses' store can also be seen with Bryant's nestled right in beside it. And while George's store was in a prime location, there was only one problem, as quoted in Harry Hodges' Hill End Story, Book 1.
Bryant's was a dimly lit, gloomy place. Too dark, the local said, for the blowflies to even see their way to the meat.
It was about this time when George and Mary's fifth child was born, who they presumably named after both the boys' grandfathers. John Bryant was born in 1871 and the first of their children to be born in Hill End. It's unclear, but this is possibly George and Mary standing in front of the butcher shop with two of their preschool children. Firstly, baby John in the arms of his mother, and little Jessie, who by this time would have been aged about 3, holding her father's hand.
This has been part 1 of The Colour Within, George Henry Bryant. Stay tuned for part 2 as the Bryant tree continues to grow and see how George and his butcher shop will ultimately leave a lasting and ongoing legacy on the now historic town of Hill End. Thank you for watching.